Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 6. I know you had an exciting few weeks in quality improvement. We're going to continue that discussion, and this week we're going to talk about outcome evaluation. The purposes of an outcome evaluation is to assess change and apply that change as a result of the intervention that you put into place. Ideally, we like to think about measurement and evaluation before the intervention happens, but the reality is many times if you're reading this, it's too late. So I was involved in many times saying, oh, we can't do an evaluation because we didn't do a pretest. Well, there are ways to do an evaluation without a pretest or without baseline data. So we're going to talk about using baseline data, not having baseline data, just to help you think creatively and how you can measure something, even if you do start a little too late. When you're coming in to do an evaluation, you really do want to go back to the logical framework or the theory of change. You want to, if there isn't one, you need to kind of tease it out with the different stakeholders and what the objectives are. What was the stakeholders wanting to show? What was this intervention supposed to do? And then you should try to link your evaluation correct questions directly to the indicators as much as possible. Now, again, we're going to talk a little bit more about interprofessional stakeholders, which they're going to have different expectations of the program, and it actually might be different from the objectives that are written down. So you need to work with these stakeholders and understand where they're coming from the different disciplines and the different perspectives that they have, and try to incorporate that into the evaluation. You also need to speak to your strengths. When you're coming in to do an evaluation, know what you do well and what can be done sharp, short, and sweet. I think these are key things. We don't want to, no one has money for long evaluations and long research, but we can show some impact when we look at the outcomes of an intervention. And of course, key is again looking at all the financial, human, and material resources you have so you're not overspending and you're not overthinking and you're not wasting anyone's time. When you do an evaluation, you have to think of the concepts and constructs that you want to measure. For example, how do you measure happiness? Usually, you're not going to have one indicator linked to happiness because it's multidimensional. Measuring it requires looking at well-being, contentment, and therefore using multiple indicators. So looking at what indicators they're using to describe the health outcome that they want is going to be critical. And measurement issues rely on the expertise and existing research and practice so you can develop and use valid and reliable data collection instruments. I already talked a little bit about design. This post-test intervention only design is definitely the weakest type of evaluation. So if that's what you have in front of you, you need to think about what it can tell you. So even doing this, doing an evaluation like this, what can you show? What can you attribute to the program or the intervention? A way to strengthen it a little bit is looking at a post-test intervention only. So if you go into a community and they've received an intervention, but a community 30 miles away, similar type of community, hasn't received this intervention, doing a post-test for both of those communities around the key indicators you want to look at can strengthen your evaluation results. This one's the most common. It's not really the gold standard, but it is definitely the most common in programs, public health programs. Pre-test, post-test. You can do a pretest post-test without a comparison group. A comparison group only increases how you can generalize and think about your outcomes. So these are two, my guess is you'll see this the most often in your work. And then we're going to look at interrupted time series. Now you've spent the last 2 weeks doing quality improvement, and that's really looking at interrupted time series. Here's what's going on with some specific variable, and then they assess the variable and look at different ways to measure it and tighten the service so then it decreases the negative health outcomes once you do that and put that intervention into place. So that's used a lot with quality improvement. So I wanted to take you back to the participatory evaluation model because we're going to really talk about step 3 here, analyzing and interpreting the data. So you can use different ways to look at an outcome evaluation. You can do both quantitative and qualitative, and a mixture of approaches depending again on what your resources are, your human and technical and financial resources are. You can do self-administered surveys, face-to-face interviews, look at archival data, look at observation, do participant observation, record reviews, open-ended questions, focus group interviews, key informant interviews. Again, a mix of qual and quant is ideal if you have the time and the resources available to do that. Let's just spend a minute on quantitative. Usually it's numerical, objective, and unbiased, kind of, but depending on what questions and what you're measuring, everyone has to make a decision around what to measure, so that creates some bias. It's linked to sorting and categorizing data. Variables are usually looked at categorical. They can only be in one group, dichotomous, yes, no, just one, just two options, or numerical, which could be more of that continuous 0 to a million, depending on what you're doing. It's looking at comparisons, mean, mode, median, frequencies, percentages, and it's also looking at inferential, which means that X produced Y. Qualitative is non-numerical. It's deep and descriptive. It's textual analysis, coding and interpreting what people are saying. It can be looking at documents and reviewing them, trying to find common themes and policy documents. It can be observational as well, using checklists or notes-based formats with appropriate categories for recording events. So when you look at the next step, which is interpreting data and reaching conclusions, you want to use, if you can, a combination of methods to answer the research or the evaluation questions. You might have interview transcripts, photographs, recording, and maps that represent different aspects of the data collection. The aim is to present a balanced report of the conclusion that discusses the value of the intervention to the different stakeholder audiences, again, thinking of the different professions and the interprofessional groups that the stakeholders represent. The value may both be tangible and intangible because you're probably assessing it against multiple criteria. And then somehow you have to make sense of the data that you collect. You have to analyze it and interpret it. And again, using the stakeholders and working with the stakeholders to do this is critical, because then you'll understand the community values and expectations, and you'll also be able to talk to issues related to social justice and equity.